There's this sweepstakes thing going on, and Sweet Relief is offering us up as tribute, which is kind of cool for raising funds for mental health. So they thought of all of you guys, which makes sense. I mean, because as I'm a fan of all of your music and I listen to all kinds of the mental health stuff that comes through in the lyricism all the time, I feel like rock music is really a key component of just expression in general, right?
Really?
So then they were, yeah, and then they asked me to host, and I was like, but I'm the new kid. All right. So I get to come and hang out with all of you guys. So thank you so much for just offering up some time to come through and jump on with this discussion. So I did have some mental health related questions. I just feel like you guys have all been touring, right? And I don't know if you know much about EvaUnderFire, but we had never toured before the pandemic. So the massive, insane amount of emotional roller coaster that I experienced just getting here after the fact, what was that like for you guys? I mean, you guys already had careers rolling, things are going, music's released. Like this was wild, right?
Yeah. Um, it was really tough, right? Because I think that, there were a lot of decisions that we had to make that we wouldn't normally have to make. And I think there were a lot of circumstances that we were all dealing with that we didn't, signing up as musicians and touring artists and people who just want to write songs and perform live. Like that moment in time hit and we're all going, what the hell is happening?
Right.
And everybody was feeling the same thing, right? The amount of anxiety and stress. I know that we were all together dealing with that, but we couldn't talk. Like, it's not like when you're on tour and you're like backstage and you're shooting the shit and everyone's talking. And you're like, man, this thing, like we couldn't talk to anybody. And we're all locked in trying to be these artists that obviously, clearly, like you said, especially with this band, like I'm always in my head. And now all of a sudden, that's the only place I'm allowed to be while I'm trying to navigate all these waters that I've never been in. So it was definitely probably the most anxious time of my life, I would say.
Yeah, I would echo that. Just like personally, I think everybody kind of experienced a similar process where everybody kind of went into their caves, for a year or two. And I was all stoked about that because I kind of like holding off for an album and really going through a deep process. But on top of that, before this all happened, I had moved a state away. So I didn't really have the friends and the support system and, like, the people you've known your whole life where you can just call them up and vent, and you trust them, and the conversation isn't gonna turn into like surface bullshit and whatever. So like I kind of lost my family and close friends, and so I felt a little extra isolated. So if me and my girl weren't good, or we were fighting or something, it's like I was like double stranded, and locked in. And so I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who can relate to that. But so I kind of felt this compounding effect of the isolation feeling, which at first I was super excited about, and then it became very painfully clear to me like how much of a social creature we are, how much we really need that interaction. And so I think going back out on the road and everything, it was, as y'all dealt with, there's a lot of anxiety and problems and things we had to work through to get back to kind of a normalcy. But I I learned so much appreciation for what we do. And like, I kind of got burnt out on touring over the years, and now like I don't think I could get burnt out again. I'm just like so thankful and grateful to do it again.
Yeah.
Other humans, right?
Yeah.
Like for better or for worse, like other
Right.
humans. It's wild. It was wild to me. And Johnny, you brought up a great point, because I think and I've talked to many people about this. When you are a creative spirit and you need time alone, right? To like be in your head and get out the things that you want to write about, or try to be in that like just isolated space, but it's elective. And I think when it no longer was elective anymore and it became forced, now it changed the dynamic entirely. And now it was like this very strange, well, what do you mean? I like literally don't have access to other people. and that was, I think, like earth shattering, right? And I'm honestly, I'm grateful because our experience was a lot different. We hadn't toured yet, right? But we were always, we were actually prepping to like go out because the Love, Drugs, and Misery album was supposed to drop in March of 20, which everything shut down in March of 20. So it didn't happen at all. But we were in New York in like Times Square when everything shut down. So that was pretty bizarre. But because of that, we were able to, like, we had all been exposed together. So like we still live in the same state and things like that. So we did have a little bit of a unit to maintain some sort of normalcy around, and that was my safe haven, like being around friends that I've grown up with and played music with. And so I can't imagine like just moving or like even just having your very different experiences. So Doc, Danny, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it was a double-edged sword for me in a lot of aspects. I think it was really rough because we had just finished recording an album. So we were like, what the hell do we do with this? Do we put it out when we can't support it, when we can't do much, as far as like really pushing it? Obviously you can push it on socials and all that stuff, but we were like, well, we don't know how long this is going to last. And when it became apparent that it was going to last, we were like, I mean, let's just put it out. And so it was kind of a bummer that we didn't really get to support it and tour on it and all that stuff. And that was one thing, but like, at the same time, like I got to, I had been in a relationship for like 2 years at that point. So we were kind of in this, like, are we going to go the route of like permanency, or are we going to like, where are we going from here? And being home allowed us to get really, really close. And now we're getting married. So that's super awesome. So in one aspect, that was really great. But being stuck at home, we hadn't, got a house together. We hadn't got any of our stuff together. So being stuck in that, like, I was basically alone in my room for that whole like year, and it was just horrible. So there were definitely a lot of ups and downs. I like felt like I lost my sense of purpose without being out on the road, connecting with fans and all that stuff. So I was like, I got to do something with my life because I'm sitting here wasting away, tearing out my hair. And so I decided to become a CPT, which is a certified personal trainer. And that was another saving grace. And it was like, I almost got to look outside of music to like get other things in my life kind of figured out, I guess. While everything was shut down. But God, the second that we came back, I was like, I will never take this for granted ever again.
Yeah. I think for myself, Badwolves in particular, kind of re-entering the touring space in 2022, we were fighting for our professional lives in many ways. I think our particular experience was unique, but it's also connected to what it is to be an artist in the modern context, because I think artists tend to deal with mental health issues because we work hard, we make records, we put our soul out there, we put on shows, we put everything out there, but it does kind of rely on some type of external validation. And when that is kind of like, you kind of survive on that, like you did something and no one liked it, how could that not make you feel crappy, right? So we have this tendency, this like really vampiric relationship with the outside world and having it be able to affect us. And, and our experience was something very intense in that space, and dealing with criticism and dealing with the kind of internet hate and all that stuff. But, I think being on the road, once I got there, it was very mission oriented for me. And I think a lot of the other guys in the band, it was like, here's this great challenge, and let's step up and let's punch through these walls. And it was very like invigorating. My actual like kind of downtimes and when I dealt with depression was when I would come home from tour. Every tour I would come home, there'd be like a 2-week period where I'd still be hyped up from the tour, and I'd have like a lull. And I think a lot of that was kind of recontextualizing what life was like before the pandemic, because you were home for so long, you kind of got into this flow state of what home was like, and then now it was like, I don't know what home is, because it's not the pandemic home, but I And that was my difficulty, my main mental, I just dealing with depression when coming home and trying to figure out a new rhythm, so that was kind of from my perspective.
Man, I didn't even think about that, but like you both, Danny and Doc, brought up great points, because it did have there was a component where you were kind of forced to like think about yourself more than the music, than the project, than the band, than the touring life, than the business, right? Whatever that looks like. And you kind of had to, dig deeper into self a little bit, because there was nothing else that could happen. But then the ebbs and flows of the tour life, right? Once you get that back, and then you have to go home again, but then you get it back maybe again, like later. That was a crazy thing for me. Like when the first couple of tours that we went on, and Johnny, if you hadn't made touring so fun with Nothing More, maybe I wouldn't have felt those post-tour blues as badly, man. But like, holy crap, that's a thing. That's like a real, that is a crazy thing. And then I saw this wild, like it was, I forget, you guys would probably know this guy. He's like a biologist, talking about dopamine and what it does to the brain, and kind of the effects of like those highs and lows, and how chemically the brain goes through the gauntlet, and it doesn't really understand how to like come back to baseline after you just went way up here and experienced like top of the world and like super rush being on tour with all these, people. And like we were saying before, we finally got people back, like other humans, right? And then you go home and you're like, what is this?